Hello, everyone. Welcome to Caesar's Women's Podcast. My guest today is New York attorney Richard C. Bell. Welcome to the Seasoned Women's Podcast, the podcast that is raw, real, and uncut. No topics are off limits. Seasoned women, we're going to make it make sense. I'm just saying. My name is Mary Dean, and I am the host for Seasoned Women and the queen of all seasons. My guest today is New York attorney Richard C. Bell. Welcome, Attorney Bell, to Seasoned Women.
Thank you, Mary. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm going to give you a little bio of Attorney Bell. Attorney Bells have been practicing law, concentrating in personal injury, medical malpractice, civil rights cases in New York City since 1982. He is a trial attorney representing people in substantial cases, including auto accidents, construction accidents, medical malpractice, nursing home abuse, police brutality, wrongful death, and more. He is a tough trial attorney, but treat his clients with respect and compassion because he understands the personal trauma that they are experiencing. He also participating in speaking engagements about personal injury law and voting rights at several prestigious professional gatherings in Barcelona, Cancun, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C., and at Duke University and MLK High School in Manhattan. He has also been honored by super lawyers and the $1 Million Advocates Forum. That's interesting, Richard. Attorney
Thank you.
Bell, very interesting. He is the author of Why Insurance Companies Hate When You Hire an Attorney, a Lawyer, a consummate premier on what to expect when you bring a personal injury medical malpractice lawsuit in New York City, and voting the ultimate act of resistance, the real truth from the voting rights battlefields. That's something we're dealing with all across the country, right, Richard?
Unfortunately, we'll be dealing with it for a long time at this rate, but yes, all over the country.
All over the country. Which chronicles his pro bono work as a voting rights attorney in the courtroom and at the polls, fighting voter suppression and advocating voter voting as the best method of turning anger into action and ideas into law. I'm telling you, come on. He has been interviewed by major media networks and publications as a legal analyst, including one 1010 Wins, CNN.com, NBC TV, numerous affiliates nationally, ABC TV, SF, CBSNews.com, Yahoo, Finance, Business Insider.com, Healthline.com, discussing topics ranging from personal injury cases to voting rights and civil rights issues. You are a national treasure,
Oh,
Attorney
that's
Bell.
very kind. That's very, very kind of
Yes. And he has a documented history of success at trial and settlement negotiations, including numerous multi-million-dollar verdicts and settlements. Everybody, please welcome attorney Richard C. Bell. Thank you for
Thank
joining me
you.
today,
Oh, my
Attorney Bell.
pleasure.
I mean, just reading your bio, it's just incredible the things that you have done. I know over the years you have sent me stuff that I have shared on my Facebook page when it comes to some of the work that you do, and it's just incredible. It really is.
Well, I'm fortunate enough to have represented some wonderful people and very important causes. It's my pleasure because I think as an attorney, we all have an obligation not just to obviously do our practices as best we can, but to also try to give back to the community and the country.
Yes, absolutely. Before I go into your questions, can you, do you have the ability to reach across other parts of the country besides New York to help people with the issues dealing with what your Pacific areas of law is?
Okay,
And
so I am admitted, meaning I took the bar exam and got admitted in both New York and New Jersey. I, in certain instances, you are limited by your license, but a court in another state could give permission by application to allow me to try a case or two in another state if
okay,
they believe that it's necessary for me to do so, and obviously I'm in good standing. So the answer is not normally, but there are exceptions to that for
okay,
particular cases.
okay, that's good to know. All right. Attorney Bill, can you explain the typical process for filing a personal injury claim in New York?
Sure. So number one is get to a lawyer as soon as possible, because filing a case is not something that should be done without a lawyer. Um, the rules are peculiar and sometimes unforgiving because you have statute of limitations times within which to sue. And when you're involving a municipality, a city, or city hospital, or the state, there are some very strict time limits. So number one, you want to get to a lawyer because the filing is the most important part are the time limits. Because
Mhm.
once you file the case, your lawyer files it, then it goes through a long process. But in the first instance, you've got to get it filed.
Okay, so would that pertain to most states in the country? You got to
Oh,
get to it.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be absolutely nationally. Every state, they may have different statutes, but
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, those statutes of limitations, meaning the time within which to sue, is unforgiving. So you need to do that first and foremost.
Okay. Okay. Does your well, I just asked you that question. Does your law license allow you to practice in another state? And you answered that already. Thank you very much for that. That's good to know. What are the key factors you consider when evaluating the strength of a medical malpractice case?
Okay, so both a medical malpractice case and a personal injury case, multiple things I look at. So number one, was there negligence? Can we prove that somebody did something wrong? That would be true if it were a building owner or a construction company or a driver. In a medical malpractice, the doctor would have to live up to what's called the standard of care
Mhm.
for a doctor in his or her situation. So in New York, which is different in other states, but in New York, the doctor can't simply make a judgment call and it was the wrong judgment. The doctors get a lot of leeway in that. You'd have to show that there was a standard of care they had to live up to. They had to do things within the parameters of a certain way. And if so, they didn't do it, then there would be negligence. Then you have to show what's called causation. So
Mhm.
a doctor could be negligent or a construction company or a driver. But if that didn't cause your injuries, then you don't have a case. So the second thing
Mhm.
we look at is what we call causation, that the negligence, because a lot of people come to me and say, oh, the doctor was very negligent or the other driver was negligent. I said, yeah, but we can't prove that that caused your injuries. And
Mhm.
then there's the third level, which is what's called damages, which means getting money compensation for your injuries. So different lawyers would have a different floor or minimum that they would consider getting involved in a case. And since I've done this for decades, I do have a very high level of case I would take in terms of damages would kind of have to be in the level of a amputation, death,
Mm,
paralysis, very serious debilitating surgeries.
mhm,
Because the amount of work I would have to put into a small injuries is really the same amount of work I'd have to put into a large injury. So in order to have that kind of evaluation, that's why you want to see, number one, the lawyer early.
mhm,
Number two, you want to see the lawyer to get his evaluation of where they think the case might be going. There's so many variables you don't know at the beginning, but there are certain areas that you can tell at that point. And number three, you want to make sure that the lawyer evaluating it for you is someone that doesn't just evaluate the case and do some of the work. You want to get someone that actually would go to trial on the case. That's what I do. If the case doesn't
mhm,
resolve, I'll be the one that's trying it. It's my practice because you want that insurance company. In the end, that's who's going to be defending the case through attorneys. But you want that insurance company to know that you have a lawyer that's not afraid to try the case if it can't be resolved.
I know that's right. Okay. How do you determine the appropriate amount of compensation? And I think you've answered that one as well.
Well, actually, I would say more on that part specifically because
Okay,
there's a question that
okay.
comes up in every first meeting. Okay, so you have asked that important question, and my answer is always the same. I have no idea how much you're going to be compensated for because
Mhm,
number one, every case has its own set of facts. In our legal
mhm,
system, it's not like in workers' compensation, they have what's called schedules. There's a schedule of certain types of injuries or how much money get paid based on loss of use of a limb and these kinds of things. That's not true because in personal injury medical malpractice, the amount gets determined in three ways. Number one, if the lawyers can come to a settlement at some point in the case before it goes to trial, then it's an amount that we can all agree on. That
mhm,
we all say, that's fair under these circumstances. Number two, if we cannot negotiate a settlement, which does happen in most cases, but not all, that's why I try cases, you can't agree, then a jury comes back and they give you the answer. They determine based on the evidence what they think the number is. In New York, the judge doesn't tell them it has to be this number or that number. The lawyers can suggest it in their summations, but the jurors have the say
mhm,
at the end. And then there's the third level. New York's a little different than most states. Many states, an appeals court will uphold the amounts. That's not going back to the other legal issues in the appeal, but if it's just about the amount, there are many states where the courts won't touch it. In New York, they knock them down all the time. So that would be the third level unit. If you got $10 million, the court could knock it down to $2 million on appeal.
mm,
So there's a
okay,
lot of different levels. And that's why cases settle because, it's both the jury and the appeals court that's going to make the final determination.
okay. I'm a want to piggyback off of that. Have you ever tried a class action lawsuit in a medical malpractice?
Class
Or
action
just
lawsuits, no, I don't
okay,
do that. Lawyers who do class action lawsuits, if you're going to someone, just make sure that's what they concentrate in because that's another type of case than just a normal medical malpractice or personal injury case. That would
okay,
be against drug companies or manufacturers of medical instruments, things of that nature.
right, okay, okay. Um, can you provide examples of a successful medical malpractice cases you've handled in the past?
Sure. Unfortunately for the clients, obviously, they were horrible. Um,
Mm,
one I can think of was there was a young, early 30s construction worker, a wife and two young children, and he was having back surgery, because he was injured on the job. And the back surgery itself went very well. But he gets into what we call the post anesthesia care unit, where you have to post-op, you're monitored in a care unit, and the doctors there failed to diagnose that he was suffering from sleep apnea. And
Oh.
so when you have sleep apnea, you have
Mhm.
to be very careful because you're administering, morphine and Dilaudid, which is a chemically formed a derivative of morphine. It's about 8 times higher. Now they give you
Uh,
these things post-op, and that's fine. But if someone has sleep apnea, you have to be very careful in what you're
mm,
doing. So they didn't diagnose that properly. They gave him a lot of Dilaudid and morphine. But
mm,
then the third literally fatal error was they transferred him to an unmonitored room
mm,
and gave him another, what we call respiratory depressant, which sleep apnea is obviously a respiratory depressant, as is the Dilaudid and the morphine. He went into a room, he wasn't monitored. They gave him Ativan, which is a respiratory depressant to help him sleep. And they did not monitor him. So it means they didn't know when his oxygen level was going down or his blood pressure was going down or his pulse. And unfortunately, um, he died because
oh.
literally they were putting him to sleep and not
Mm,
monitored. So that was a very sad case. And that one actually went to, it's a few days before trial when that case settled against the hospital and a number of doctors and nurses. That was a very sad case. I had another one where client they had erectile dysfunction. He got a penile implant. The surgeon he was going to for the surgery and the post-op failed to diagnose that he had a bad infection. He just kept treating it with Cipro and said it would go away. It was getting worse and worse. The doctor did not recognize that it was going to gangrene.
mm.
And the client presented at a hospital and unfortunately was so advanced that he had a amputation of 2/3 of his penis because it was gangrenous at that point. The doctor just
Wow.
completely missed it. And that was an interesting case because the doctor had said he gave certain advice to the client and he told him to
Mm,
come back a few days later. And we were able to prove that what the client said was true, which was the doctor said he was flying out of the country that night. And I got airline records and he did fly out of the country that night. So the jury knew that this doctor was not credible.
the sleep apnea part of what you talked about that. Now that's scary because I know some people that have sleep apnea, and
Mm-hmm.
this is some important information that they need to know.
Oh, they
But
need to know if they're going into surgery, that they need to talk to the doctor and say, what precautions are going to be taking because I do have sleep apnea.
right.
You want to alert the doctors immediately. And then there was a third case that a woman was giving birth and her regular obstetrician wasn't available. So someone else came in, the birth went fine, the baby's fine,
Mhm.
but after the birth, the regular doctor showed up and they kind of one substituted for the other. And somewhere along the way, one of them left 7 gauze pads in this woman. And none of the nurses picked it up. You're supposed to do a count. If you put something in, this has to come out, obviously. And nobody did the count. The two doctors pointed fingers at each other. And the woman complained a few days later to her doctor, and he says, that's just kind of normal pain. It's your first baby. Don't worry about it. Well, pain was excruciating. She went to the hospital, and they found 7 gauze pads in her. So that's another thing. In giving birth,
Yeah,
don't let the doctor push you off and just say, it's nothing. It's a normal thing. You make sure you check it out.
yeah. That's a issue when it comes to infant mortality
Yep,
and Black women in birth. High rates
absolutely.
of that. So
Absolutely,
yeah,
and just being told, don't worry about that. Never worry about it.
no,
Be
absolutely.
safe and sorry.
God, okay. Whew. How
Oh, they're
important,
scary. These are
I
scary
know,
things that go on out there.
oh God, how important is gathering information, building a strong personal injury or medical malpractice case?
Okay, information is everything. Early information is best.
Yeah.
So if for a personal injury case and it's a product and the product is still exists, we'll get a hold of that. If it's a site that had, bad steps or other defects, we'll get an investigator out immediately, get pictures,
Hmm.
get an engineering expert out there immediately if it's still in the same condition. Medical malpractice, you get the records as early as possible, have them evaluated by an expert in the field so we know where we're going. We also want to make sure if the client says, well, this person, my family member observed this or that, make sure we get statements from them immediately because it's fresh in their mind. So the good lawyer does the investigation quickly because it preserves things that might disappear later.
Have you ever had a case where a doctor or the hospital wasn't truthful when it came to what they did and did not do when it came to one of their patients? Did they change
Ah,
records? Did they try to change something in
okay,
in the
so
records?
okay, good question. So I had a case where I literally hired a handwriting expert because I was sure that the notes didn't match up within the same shift of whose handwriting that was with the same signature. Unfortunately, handwriting analysis is very, very, very difficult to prove. So we weren't able to prove it, but um, my suspicion was correct in this sense. There was another portion of the record where the entry was made after a death.
Mm,
And I said, why'd you make that? Well, my supervisor told me I should put that in because I forgot to put it in earlier. Well, that's a red flag, obviously. Um, that the case with the penile implant, there's no question. The doctor wasn't telling, couldn't tell the truth about what he advised the patient and that he was going out of town because he denied that he's leaving the country.
mm,
So he obviously wasn't telling the truth. And those two doctors on the gauze pads, I mean, if you're pointing at each other, one of you should have known and done the count.
right.
So somebody wasn't telling the truth. It's almost always somebody's not telling.
Wow. Are there specific time limitations for filing personal injury or medical malpractice claims in New York? And how does that impact potential cases?
It's everything because I've had people come to me with potentially very good cases. I unfortunately said to them, oh, the time has run. You had to do this within a certain amount of time. And it's in New York. Now, other states are different. So I don't want any of your viewers or listeners to think that this is true in their state. But in New York, when you're suing, for instance, a city, you have 90 days to serve the claim on them before, and a year and 90 to serve the actual lawsuit on them. But if you don't serve that claim in the 90 days, there could be very big problems. Your case could get dismissed. Medical malpractice cases, generally speaking, um, there's a number of years, but it's not a lot. Personal injury is generally 3 years. There's always exceptions, but you don't want to be that case that goes up to the appeals court to become the exception because
Yeah.
it's extremely rare. So the best thing is if you have a thought that somebody was negligent and that negligence caused you to be harmed, just get to a lawyer as soon as possible. I think I want to emphasize something. It's a good point to emphasize here. Personal injury medical malpractice cases. Almost every lawyer does them on a contingency fee basis, which means you don't pay any money unless the case is successful and then a
Mm,
percentage of it goes to the lawyer. So what does that mean? That means that the poorest person can have the best lawyer, and this is basically the only field that can happen.
okay.
So you don't have to worry about money. You don't have to be a rich person or an upper middle class person. You could be the poorest person. If the case is good, the case is good. And a lawyer will take it and you won't be putting anything out of your pocket. So it's something I'm very proud of in the American system that this contingency fee system exists in my fields because it allows every person to get the best legal talent.
Yeah, that's good. Because there's a lot of people that don't have those funds to pay a lawyer up front.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely
you
not.
know,
No, no, no. In other cases where you have to pay a lawyer, the rates are very, very expensive.
right,
You're
very
correct. Not in this field. So I want your viewers and listeners to know you have a personal injury or medical malpractice case and you think you do, go to a lawyer. You're not going to get charged any money. Never seen a
good,
lawyer charge money for that.
good. That's good to know. Can you explain the role of expert witnesses in personal injury and medical malpractice trials?
Okay. So in medical malpractice cases, it is mandatory to have a physician expert. In personal injury cases, it varies by the type of case, whether you need an engineer or a safety expert or an economist. That will vary. Their
Hmm.
role is essential because how are you going to prove to a jury when it's a technical issue like medicine, of course, where it's mandatory, but let's just say it's a bad product or it's a broken up sidewalk situation. Um, you need to prove to that jury that this condition in the personal injury case or the doctor's conduct in a medical malpractice case was negligent. It fell below a standard
Hmm.
that we call the standard of reasonable care. So getting an expert and getting one involved early to review the records, if it's a site or a fall down occurs or construction, doing a site inspection if necessary, that's essential. But here's the key to experts. So I've used so many experts over the years. Because an expert looks great on paper, they have the greatest credentials in the world
Hmm.
and they're the smartest person and they wrote the book on it. That's great. But what's better is to have the expert that can be on that witness stand and talk to jurors like people
Yeah,
and explain the most complex technical issues, whether it's engineering, economics, medicine, and bring it down to the level where any lay person at any level of education can understand.
yeah, I would
So
think that that would be very important.
it's very
Yeah.
important, and you don't find a big percentage of experts. That's why I use a lot of the people over and over again because they're really, really good at doing that. Because my job as a trial attorney is to always bring the complex down to the simple because we have lay jurors. But doing that and having an expert just talk as if he's in the medical school class or the PhD program in engineering is useless. Nobody's going to listen to them. They're going to turn them off because who can understand that?
You're right. Yeah, it's better to talk to people than at people.
Than at people. And you know what? That is so true in life,
Yeah,
and it's so true in the courtroom as well.
yes, yes. Uh, Attorney Bell, how do you stay updated on changes in laws or precedents that may affect your clients' cases?
Yes, that's a great question. I had a physician friend who many years ago said, "Oh, the law, it's not like medicine, it's pretty black and white, and the law is the law." I said, "You could not be more wrong." I said, "We wouldn't need lawyers and judges if everything was crystal clear." The
Hmm.
law is flexible. It's kind of like the Constitution. It's a living document. The law is living also. It's forever changing. That's just not the laws that are on the book, but judges' interpretations of the law, because that's what
Hmm.
most of the time the law that's going to affect your case is how other judges have interpreted it. So, I get the New York Law Journal daily. I read a publication. It's New York on personal injury and medical malpractice cases. Comes out every week. It has all the new cases and new laws that are happening in New York. It's all the time. And another great way of doing it is my discussions with my colleagues. I mean, I'm doing this long enough. I have a lot of colleagues that are doing it a long time, and we talk to each other in general about the changing law and where we think things are going and what the latest interpretation is. Because staying on top of it and doing your legal research is
Mhm.
another essential part of what a lawyer is doing for you.
Yes. What advice do you have for individuals who are unsure whether they have a valid personal injury or medical malpractice case?
I'll give them the advice that I would give anyone in life. There's no stupid questions. There's
Right,
only not asking the question and being ignorant. So
right.
if you have any thought that it might be, I mean, I get inquiries and no, it's not even close to a case. I don't get mad at someone for asking. I think they're really smart for asking.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
ask, ask early, never be afraid to consult someone. Like I said, I never charge a fee for the consult. I don't know any personal injury or medical malpractice attorneys that charge you for the consult. Like I said, once they take your case, and it will be on a contingency fee. So there's no financial cost to you,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll let you sleep a little easier. You know whether or not you have a case. And I'll tell you, every time I say to someone, you know what, it's either not the kind of case I take or I don't see it, but you need to get another opinion. Because like I
Okay.
said, yeah, the law is forever changing, and the law is much more like art than science. You know, it's interpretation. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's flowing, it's changing. So I may see something. I remember very early in my career, I had a woman come in and she came in for this case of falling down. And while she was talking, she talked to me about this terrible burn injury she had. And she said, "Oh, but that's not a case because I went to three lawyers and they told me it was a workers' compensation case only, and I can't sue my employer." And I said, "That's true under New York law. You can't sue your employer." I said, "But I want to hear more about that because that was so serious, much more so what she came in for." And while three lawyers turned it down, I took it. And
Mm-hmm.
early in my career, that was the largest case I had. It turned into a very, very big case. And three
Oh,
lawyers said no.
okay. Reading your bio, I see that you also have dealt with civil rights cases as well. So, is that something that comes once in a blue moon to you because you're more focused on the injury and the malpractice part of your practice, or what?
Yes, so in the civil rights sector, um, it's really been false arrest and police brutality. And it doesn't come that often because, number one, um, as much as there's highly publicized horrible cases,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't happen every day in a city like New York. Okay, it happens,
Mm-hmm.
and there's certainly a lot of false arrests, and there's certainly some police brutality. But in order to prove a case, it's a certain set of facts you need. I once had a brutality case where when the client came in and he told me the story, I said, all right, I said, but you know it's going to be your word against in New York, we have a sheriff's department. They happen to be a sheriff as opposed to police, but they have the same authority on certain levels as the police. And I said, it's going to be very difficult. And I spoke to his legal aid lawyer about it, and we just got so lucky because the legal aid lawyer said, "You're not going to believe this, but there was a legal aid lawyer on a bus across the street from this incident who saw the whole thing.
Mm.
Get her name, and she's going to be your witness because it happened exactly like you said."
Okay.
Yeah, and the sheriff just lied through his teeth at depositions, but the city did settle the case with me because they know that nobody was going to believe that sheriff.
Okay. Okay. Well, uh, That's a huge problem across the country,
Oh, it's
police
a huge,
brutality.
huge problem
Yeah,
because, so much of this takes place in the shadows, right?
yes, yes.
And it's not enough that it happened in a court of law. You got to prove it happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the frustration. I had a false arrest case, and it was a yeah, he was 19, I guess. He got arrested and they were looking for a young black male. Okay, that was basically the description, and it was up in Harlem. I mean, what is the chance that you're going to find a few people that fit that description? Because there was
Right.
someone touting a gun at a block party, and they arrested my guy. He had nothing to do with anything. And
Mm-hmm.
the you know what? The police they settled the case before the officer's deposition because they knew that it was ridiculous. They kept him in jail for 3 days for nothing. It was obviously not the kid.
Right.
And he didn't forget about the script. That's an idiotic description, obviously, but they didn't even have them identified in the lineup. It was bad. So a
Yeah.
lot of this, like you said, it does happen in the shadows,
Mm-hmm.
and we know who gets targeted.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not been a secret in America for 400 years, all right? So we know what's going on, but you still have to prove the case in a court of law.
Yeah.
And that's not
That's
always.
unfortunate. And it seems like the judicial system is so unequal and unjust when it comes to, certain demographics in this country. On, have you ever ran into a judge that believes he's above or she's above the law, and, and no matter what, they can uh, uh, just do whatever they want to do and not really follow the canons, the rules that they're supposed to follow when it comes to sitting in that important position.
Yes. Unfortunately, yes. I would say the majority of judges take their role very seriously, and they try to execute on their oath very seriously. That's why we have appeals courts, because when
Mhm.
judges run roughshod and are out of control, at least we have an appeals court to look at it.
Okay.
And the answer is yes, and it's really unfortunate. I have a friend who is now a judge, been a judge for a little while, and he just finds it appalling because he used to practice law and see what would happen. So when he went on the bench, he knew, he had to be himself, which was very ethical and doing things by the book and being fair to everybody. Everybody's equal in a courtroom. That's insane when that's not true.
Hmm.
And having a bad temperament, that I've come across too. The screamers and the yellers and the pounders. I mean, that's not necessary, but I have definitely been on the other side of that many times.
Right.
It's not, I would say, someone that wants to be a trial lawyer, it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, you gotta be a tough woman or a tough guy to do it.
Right. Right. Attorney Bell, how important is voting? Uh, I know we it's been an issue for decades and for years, but how important is it for people to not just register but to vote?
Okay, you've come to the right guy because I've done pro bono voting rights work for almost 20 years. And I'm the guy, if you come in contact with me, whether if you're the delivery person, whether you came to fix my furniture, whether I bump into you in an elevator, I'm going to ask you if you registered to vote, and I'm going to ask you, did you vote?
Right, right.
Because you cannot have a real democracy
Mm,
unless everyone participates. Democracy is not a spectator sport. It's a
right.
participant sport. And I hear especially so many young people complain about the system. Okay. I actually gave I think you had said I gave speeches at Duke where I went undergrad, so I spoke to a class, and at MLK High School in Manhattan. And I said the same thing to both audiences, which was, you know, you complain about the system and you fail to realize the most important part. You are the system. They're
Thank
all
you.
afraid of you. If you
Right.
and come out and vote, they are so afraid of you, they will just do what you want so they can get
Right.
elected.
Absolutely.
But you know what? I hear people now, oh, I don't like 2024 candidates who are probably going to be on the ballot, and everything
Mm,
didn't get done that I, no, everything is not going to get done that you want
right.
because we work within a system where there's going to be a lot of compromises because the alternative to compromise is have a dictator and then you
Mm,
just get it one way. There you go. Won't be your way, most probably, but it will be
mm,
one way. So I tell people that it what you said earlier that I had said in my book um, that voting turns anger into action and ideas into law because nobody likes to talk about it, but the process of getting things into law and getting the right kinds of judges on the bench, how
mm.
important is it? Well, you
Yeah.
ask a widow how to have an abortion in Texas or Georgia or Alabama right now.
Come
Okay?
on. That's right.
Ask them if that's
Mm,
who's on this, who's the president and who's appointed to the Supreme Court is important. You ask people in voting rights and civil rights in a lot of those red states if it's important to have the kind of legislators or governors and judges that their rights are protected. Ask them if that's important because you know what?
that's right.
If you voted for the right people who mean when I say right, meaning right for you, that it's your issue, whether it's abortion or climate change or civil rights or voting rights, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think things, and I find this most in young people, it's very frustrating. Things are going to just change tomorrow. Mary, when's the last time you saw a big problem change in a day?
Yeah. Not ever.
Not ever. And I'm from your school. It's a not
Uh,
ever. And it's not ever because there is a process. I understand people don't like to hear about process. They just want to
mm-hmm.
hear about the policy. But I always like to tell people process is policy. Because
Right.
look at what Mitch McConnell did with that Senate and those two Supreme Court justices. He took the process, he turned it up on its head, and he snuck in two justices that should have never been there.
Mm,
And that's why everyone needs to register. Everyone needs to vote. I don't care if you don't love the person you vote for. Love the person you're married to, the person you're living with, or your parents, your siblings. You don't have to love the person you vote for. You have to like their policies more than the other person's policies.
right. Absolutely. So important. It's just so important
And you
to,
got to get in there, right?
yes,
You can't win it unless you're in it. And
right.
winning means getting what you want done. And you know what? It's not going to be 100. I didn't get 100% of what I wanted from every candidate I ever voted for. But you know
Mhm.
what? The alternative would have buried things that were
Hello.
to me.
Come on.
Do we
You know,
really do we really have to revisit the last administration compared to this administration? Come on, let's be
come on.
real.
Absolutely. I tell people when they said, well, what good is it going to do for me to vote? My vote don't count. Well, if your vote didn't count, why do you think they're trying to change all these laws, change the laws around the country to suppress your vote if your vote didn't count?
Oh, Mary, that is a great way of looking at it. Why would they try to stop you from voting if it didn't mean anything?
Right.
If it
Ah,
didn't mean anything, and then I tell people, oh, so maybe you're too young to remember these people, but in 2000, it came down to hundreds of votes in Florida was
yeah.
the difference between Al Gore and George W. Bush. And
Mhm.
I feel it was quite a big difference between those two. I think the environment would be in a different place if Al Gore had been elected.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and Iraq and all of that. I just think
Yeah.
we would have had a different world.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, Attorney Bell, I'd like to, can you give the people uh, some last words about, if they feel like they have an issue when it comes to injury or malpractice, and they're afraid to step up, what would you say to them?
Should be afraid not to step up because it won't cost you any money and you'll get peace of mind to know whether or not you should bring a lawsuit. And
Yes,
last thing you want to do is let that time run out because you got to do it quickly always. And 10 years later or 3 years later or 2 years later say, gee, I was talking to someone and they said I really should have brought a lawsuit. No, you don't want woulda, shoulda, coulda. You want to
mm,
live life with I tried.
yeah,
I tried. And also just want to put that out there one more time. Register to vote and
yes,
follow my 3 rules of voting. Early, early, early. Just do it early. If you're in a state that you can, do it early so you can fix mistakes.
come on now,
Right?
preach, come on and teach.
That's it. I just want people to
Yeah,
participate because you know what? The country and the world really will be a better place. Maybe not
yes,
tomorrow, but maybe for this generation or next year.
yeah,
Doesn't matter. We're all in it together, so let's just do it together.
let's just do it together. Absolutely. We're in solidarity on that one. Okay.
Absolutely.
How can people contact you, Attorney Bill, if, I know in the state of New York, but, you know, if somebody thought that they had something outside of New York and they wanted to go to a judge, how can they contact
Okay, so my website is 877calllaw.com. That's CALLLAW.com. My phone number is 877-CALL-LAW, and they can contact me either way. And they can also take a look at my books. One is Why Insurance Companies Hate When You Hire a Lawyer. That's kind of a step-by-step for accidents and malpractice victims. And my voting rights book, Voting the Ultimate Act of Resistance. Because I want every one of my personal injury clients and medical malpractice clients, I get all over them for voting too, because that's important.
you? That's important. Can you put that contact information in the chat so it can be shared? Would be greatly
Yes, I
appreciated before
can.
we get off of this.
I'm going to
Uh,
do it right now with my semi-technological skills. Let's see. I'll do my best. Here we go.
yeah, yeah. I know this technology is a learning process for a whole bunch of us. Uh, we have to adapt to change. That's what I tell people. That's one of the things that uh, when I retired from Boeing, and we would used to go to meetings. They would say, I got to learn how to adapt to change. When the systems change and upgraded, we had to learn to adapt to that. So yeah,
And you know what, Mary? That serves us all well in life.
yes, absolutely,
I
absolutely.
think it's in there. Is it in there, Mary?
Yes, it popped up. And yes, it is. It
Okay,
is.
great.
Okay. All right. All right, Attorney Bell. I appreciate you. I appreciate the fact that we have kept in contact with each other
Absolutely.
over these years. So yeah, I appreciate your calendar that you send me every year.
Oh, well, that's something that I love doing. I send my magnetic refrigerator calendar.
Yes, absolutely. I love it. I love it.
Thank you.
So,
And thank you for doing such good things for your community, for your state, and for your country, because
oh, thank
what
you.
you do is so important. You get great messages out there to people, and you got to listen to Mary. She knows what she's talking about, she knows whereof she speaks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you. So we're going to end this with saying that it's been great to talk to Attorney Richard C. Bell. He has given out a lot of great information, especially about the sleep apnea. I got to make sure that people know this because that's really kind of scary. So you have
Sure.
a great day, Attorney Bell, and I'm looking forward to any information that you want to send me that I can share. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to your audience for watching and listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Take
You
care.
have a good one.
You as well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.